Just welcome everybody to part 2 of our Diary of a Web SDK implementation. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat or do try and unmute yourself. I think you can do that, and then you can just ask a question as well. But we'll hand the floor over to Sarah since she is our in-house expert on all things Web SDK. So take it away,
Ah,
Sarah.
very fun. No, this is going to be awesome. So, yes, like Gretchen said, our last event, our last chapter was this AEP configuration. So up here, like the kind of the blue, purple square. So last time we talked a lot about sandboxes and schemas and data streams and data sets. So we talked about all this purple stuff last time. And now what we're talking about today is going to be everything that's in the blue, like the launch implementation. So from extensions, data rules, or data elements, rules, debugging. So all that good jazz is what we're going to talk about. So we're working our way. This is our chapter 2. And then next year, 2026, which is right around the corner, is where we'll then move on to our CJA setup and running tandem and prod. So really walking you guys through what we're experiencing firsthand. Awesome. So extensions, data elements, and rules. Dear diary, if I had a nickel for every time I've updated a data element to return undefined instead of an empty string, I'd be up to my knees in nickels. That is a big change. It's such a big change. Like because it's always been empty. Like if you didn't want to return something, you just set it to empty. And even during Summit or I guess it's this year still, back in March of this year at Summit, I ran into an old friend, and that's like the first thing he said to me. He's like, "You have to set it to undefined." I'm like, "I know, how crazy is that?" So funny, but something that's definitely caught everybody's attention. And so, if you thought about coming out of that first episode, we talked about all the schemas and data sets and all that good jazz. Like that was a lot of work. And actually, I'm going to go back a little bit to remind us that we're still actually doing schemas. So when you start hearing us talk about how we're implementing and launch, definitely need to have a schema and data set and data stream all in place. But we knew we weren't going to be done with our schemas. We knew we'd be like working on them a lot. So you'll see, we'll talk about how we kept updating our schema. But I just wanted to call that out. Like our schema, we kind of kept updating. And here we thought we might be okay, but we actually kind of updated into this little part area too. So our schema has been kind of changing up until like our very last piece. So you'll hear us talking about that. But so there was a lot of work we did in that first chapter of our book, our first series. And now here on our second one, when we're talking about launch, you might feel like a little like, whew, we just covered a lot, but we're just starting kind of. And so a really great way to get energized is to go talk to your web and product dev teams, because you'll need to tell them that, hey, we're going to change how we're sending data to Adobe, because you want to make them aware of maybe some new cookies that are being set that they'll see. That way they don't come back and say, who's setting this cookie? Why didn't anybody tell us we're changing cookies? But when you go over and tell them that you're changing stuff, you might be getting a dirty eye, like, oh, what are you changing? What are you adding to our backlog? But then they'll be really happy and they'll love you because you will tell them that the data layer and the launch script are not changing. So in our instance, we are super happy with our data layer. There was no reason to make any changes there. And with our launch script, we didn't have to make changes there either, which is really great. Then you're not trying to say, oh, use this launch script or use that launch script. Both of these things from a web and product developer point of view make them happy, and then they just tell you, go on your merry way. And so you can get energized from their energy. And then you can also get energized by like your little energy, because we can let out our own little whoosh, because appMeasurement and Web SDK can run side by side. I am pretty sure when we moved over to appMeasurement, I won't say eons ago, but a while ago, like that was a hard cutover. So what that's difficult is you can't like really compare your data at the same time. Like you can't have you couldn't have both running, both the old school, I think it was like S code at that time, or your H code, and appMeasurement. Like that was just not possible. But here, appMeasurement and Web SDK, it is possible from an analytics point of view to run them side by side. And we are happy because we want to have that data like parity, like look at the data, make sure it's looking good within acceptable ranges, and we can do that. So whew, we can do that. It's a little bit of a load off our shoulders. Now there's a few tweaks we need to do, and we'll talk about those. So like we talked just on the last slide, we're using our existing launch property. So that is nice, because what we were able to do then is we created a Web SDK version of each one of our appMeasurement rules. And that's what you're seeing up there with the application process step displayed. Since we are happy with our data layer, we are happy with our analytics that we're capturing, like there was no reason to like rip and replace. Like we just wanted the same exact thing. And so we're like, okay, let's just copy our Adobe Analytics, our appMeasurement rules, and we'll Web SDK-ify them. Now, we did have to add some new data elements. So we definitely had new rules, and we added some new data elements. Some we could use on both Adobe Analytics, our appMeasurement, and our Web SDK. But in the times where we had to make a new data element, we did add Web SDK to the end of it. So both on our rules and our like new Web SDK specific data elements, we put Web SDK on there. And that is going to help us hopefully keep a little bit of our sanity. So when we push everything to run in tandem, we know we're pushing all the stuff that says Web SDK on it. And then we're not going to run everything in tandem forever. We want to pull it back out of production. And so then it also makes it easier to identify everything that we want to disable in production, you know. So we disable in production, do a publish, but we'll reinstate it in our lower environments. But having that Web SDK as part of the name made it really clean to make our libraries to enable and to disable. Now, you thought I was like kind of joking with the undefined, but it is a big deal. Like if you don't return undefined in some instances and you send your empty string, you are going to run into issues. Like your data won't be ingested, and you're like, well, why? Why are we making such a big deal between undefined and empty? And so that's that bottom picture. So I'm looking at, like, we want to capture the hash of our URL in its own field. And I'm going to talk about why in a few more slides, but we are. And so when we made that in our schema, when we added that field, that minimum length of 1 that the red arrow is pointing to, like, you can't change that to 0. We tried, it'll say no. And so then if you ask your AI helper over in AEP, that's what the green arrow is pointing to. It tells you like this minimum length, when you add like your custom field and you say it's going to be a string, then the property cannot be empty. It has to have 1. So it says by default, all string fields are assigned a minimum length of 1 character, which means it cannot be empty. That's right by where that green arrow is. And so when it means it can't be empty, it means it won't ingest it. So that very first sentence, jump it up to the beginning, the minimum length property, you know, specifies the minimum number of characters that a string must have in its value to be accepted during data ingestion. So yes, that 1, when it's an empty string, will not be happy with you. And so that's what, like, our team's been changing everything. My friend that I saw at Summit, that's, like I said, like, I think that's the first thing he said to me. Might have even beat the hi. It might have been like, they're all undefined. And then, oh, hi, nice to see you again. But that's something to keep an eye on. And then something too, well, it's really great to run everything in tandem and kind of utilize existing code. There are some times like where the shared logic just won't work, and you'll have to duplicate code, and you're like, oh, I really don't want to duplicate like the same exact thing. But if you don't, you'll run into some funny data. Like our example, like that caught our eye, is the previous page cookie. So we're like, oh yeah, just read previous page cookie. We're good to go. We already have that logic. But then when we were QAing, we're like, well, why is our previous page the same as our current page? Like, what is broken? So we would look at our, like, one of our calls, like the previous page would be right, like maybe in our Adobe Analytics call, but it would not be right in the Web SDK. or vice versa. So one call was always right, and one call was always showing this, the page that we're currently on. And that's when we realized, like, oh yeah, with the previous page logic, as soon as it picks up that previous page value out of the cookie, it writes your current page, so you're ready for the next one. And when you have two pieces of code reading that cookie, one's going to be right and one's going to be wrong. So we did have to like duplicate some of that logic. Your previous page cookie is a great example of that. Awesome. And then this one got its own slide. So we talked about a whole bunch on that previous slide, but to be ready for a faster execution by Web SDK, this one we wanted to show a lot, so it needed its own slide. So at the top left, you see our Adobe Analytics call. And so with that, what you see in that purple box is a link tracking call. So yes, we clicked on something in navigation, it sends off its s.tl, it's capturing that you clicked on in the nav, you clicked on the accounts tab. And then the orange right beside it is our page load call, because you clicked on accounts and lo and behold, you went to the account detail page, So with our Adobe Analytics, there's always been like enough time for both of those calls to fire off. Well, what we were seeing with the Web SDK, which is the bottom right, we were just seeing some like funky data. Like it didn't really mimic the two calls. And I think it's because it happened so fast that we couldn't get both our like link event and our page view event off at this, individually with Web SDK. It kind of merged them together. It was just a little funky. And so we're like, whoa, you always hear that Web SDK, it's smaller, it's lighter weight, it'll give you better SEO results, or maybe performance numbers. And I believed it. Like, there's no reason not to believe that. And I've read other studies where people saw it. But I think we really saw it firsthand here ourselves. And we're like, okay, why does our data look so weird? And so we did combine it for the Web SDK so how I said before, we mimic the calls. So with Adobe Analytics, we had our purple link tracking and then our orange page call. And that's what we did with Web SDK. We had a purple link tracking and an orange page call. But what we did is we went to our purple tracking and we just removed the send event. We're like, don't send this data. Like, we just set the data. So we're like, value our data, but then send it with our page load call. So instead of having two really close back-to-back calls, we just captured the data and then sent it on the page call. And so that's what you see there. The orange is saying, like, this is a page view call. My event type is page view. The web details holds all the same page data you see in the above orange one. But here we have that purple attribute engagement. And that's saying, like, I clicked something, and what did I click? I clicked in the menu and I clicked nav accounts. So this, I talked a lot about it here, and I think it's really pretty cool. And this kind of just helps, I think in the back of everybody's mind, there was a lot of click events happening, back in the day, and you just kind of inherited them. I think now with the Web SDK, it gives us a really slick way to still have that tracking, so we don't have to like cut people off from a report that they like, but we're not kind of like wasting a call on it. We're not sending both an s.tl. Well, I know it's not that in Web SDK, but we're not sending a link tracking call and a page tracking call. We've combined them. So I'm really pleased about that. All right, so we just talked about how your web developers and product developers will cheer you on because they don't have to change anything. You'll be cheered on that, we can run in tandem. Like, there's some changes you have to do, but we can run in tandem. But now we're going to talk about things that from here on out, you won't be letting out sweet little oof. You'll be letting out sounds, but they probably won't be sweet, and they might get you on Santa's naughty list. But that happens. So I talked about before, we were still deep in our group discussions and like personal noodling on our schemas fields, on our schema. Like, we had enough in our schema to do our most basic website. And we were good with that. We knew we'd still have to add more to our schema, but we wanted to start on a basic website and start getting like real world learnings. So what you saw, what we did with our schema in AEP, we did the out of the box AEP Web SDK experience. event field group, that's a mouthful. And then we did add a few of our own custom. So mostly out of the box, a handful of custom basic web fields in our schema. And then we came over to launch and we configured the AEP Web SDK extension. Like I talked about, we created a Web SDK version of each rule. We got you guys on our first site. That site is so basic. It was one page call and one link tracking call. So when I'm talking basic, talking very, very basic. And then we did, I think we just made a couple new data elements that were Web SDK specific. And so even from that basic of a website, we did learn stuff. We learned stuff that made us want to delete our data set, modify the schema, and then recreate our data sets. So what did we learn? Why did we delete the data set and modify the schema? We deleted the data set and did all this because we wanted to add more fields to our schema. And to add more fields, and we wanted to move some stuff around. And so we're kind of making some what they would call like maybe breaking changes. Like you can always add to your schema, but if you try to move something or delete something, then it's going to call breaking, and you can't do that unless you delete your data set. So we were fine with this. Like we knew we were learning. We deleted that data set. We're like, that's fine. We don't want that data. We'll delete our data set. That way we can modify our schema. And we just recreated the data set, and we're going to try again. So things we added were all the pieces of the URL, and we added the previous page. Now, we initially didn't do that because when you hear, oh, let me close my door. Dog got excited. Awesome, thanks guys. You hear a lot about derived fields and how awesome they are, and they are, but depending on your contract, you have a certain amount of derived fields that you can use. So they're not endless. And then also, I mean, while they can do a lot, we just didn't want to use them for something as simple as getting the domain path, URL parameters, and hash from the URL. We're like, let's not waste 4. You know, let's like, we have the data. Let's just pass it. Let's not just take it from the URL and parse it out. Let's just pass them. So we did that. And the same thing with the previous page. Like, I know you can figure out previous page logic, you know, with derived fields and all that, but once again, why would we want to, I'm going to say like waste, there's probably a better word, but I'm going to say waste. Why do we want to waste a derived field on something that in launch, we already have that logic? I'm just going to pass it. So that's what we learned. We're going to put more fields in our derived, we're going to put more fields in our schema and going to say we're derived fields for something else. So then we moved to a slightly more complex site. And so what did we do? Well, the reason that we started with our most simple and we're going to our most complex is so we could learn and copy. So we copied literally, you know, in launch, you can say copy and say where to copy it to. We copied a lot of our Web SDK specific data elements we made. So don't need to make those from scratch again, just copy them to their next property because each of these were kind of in their own property. And then some custom code that we had written within the rule, like, you know, those actions at the bottom of your rule. We liked what we did, so we copied that. And then we have added some logic into our Web SDK extension. And so we copied that too. So once again, we wanted to build, learn, go from the most simple to the most complex. And so, like I talked about with our schema, we had created some more custom field groups. So not only did we make our changes from what we learned, but with this more complex site, we needed to capture some more data. So we had added some more fields to our schema. And then this time in launch, now we're getting a little bit more complex. Like I said, our basic site was one page load call and one link tracking call. So basic. And so how you can do that and manage that site is going to be different than our a little bit more complex site. We're like, ooh, how we were valuing some of our fields might not be scalable when we get to more complex sites. So we changed how we were doing that and where we put those common variables. And yes, we learned some more. Once again, we deleted the data set because we wanted to change our schema and we recreated it. And so this learned piece, we talked about it a lot last time too. It was like, don't be afraid to try something out and then just delete stuff and try it again. I think initially I was kind of in the mindset, I was like, oh, we really have to get this right. You can't make breaking changes. Well, you can't make changes. You just have to delete your data set and then you can change your schema. And you have to be, I guess, okay with that. And we were. So what did we learn? We learned just to put even more fields in the schema. So you thought we learned that the first time, but apparently we didn't. So we're putting more in the schema instead of using derived fields. And we also said, hey, let's not rely so heavily on like those features in the data view. So, you get your data into AEP, you have your connection, and in the data view, that's where you can, when you're creating your data view, that's where you can make your derived fields. And you also have a lot of elements on that right-hand side where you can say, where you can kind of modify the data as well. And so we were just like, okay, let's not rely on those two pieces as much. So continuing to learn that. And why? So when you start looking at derived fields and maybe using those components, we're definitely using components. We're doing a lot of that stuff for metrics and all that good jazz. So I'm not saying don't ever use it, but we really wanted to make sure that our AEP data set was the source of truth. Because that AEP data set with our data, with our web and app data, that's getting piped into our data lake. And so other people within the corporation are using it. And if we are having a lot of logic in our derived fields, or like kind of complex or convoluted logic over in our component section, then the analysts that are using it in our data lake are going to have to do the same thing. And now all of a sudden you have an opportunity for differing logic. Even if we say, like, this is the exact logic to use over here, you still have that opportunity to have it slightly different. So as much as possible, we're going to say we're sending the data that we send to the data set is going to be as close to what we wanted to use it for in analysis in CJA as we're going to do outside in our own data lake. And I'm going to jump down because like one of those pieces that we thought, oh, we'll just use components for, but then we decided, nope, AEP needs to be our source of truth. And also Gretchen, who's making all these metrics in CJA in those components, I want her to still like me. And it turned out to be a lot more like time consuming than we initially thought to use like the components to help create your events. So we added web events to our schema. And like you see down there, and it's specifically to hold everything that we were sending as s.events. So granted, your s.events, you're sending like event 326 or event 4. We're not sending that. That's not helpful. But we're sending the equivalent, the name equivalent. So application category started, step displayed, page view. So we are putting those there. So it is very easy. So this is where we'll still use the components.
So much easier. And she's back on my nice list.
Back on the nice list. Yes. And so instead of having to figure out some logic to back into, was this the first page of a specific category in our application, instead of having to figure that out in components or derived fields or a combination, Gretchen can just look for, when web events includes application category started, make that a metric. And so that is definitely still using the component section. So we're still good with that. But that type of logic is very, very straightforward for over in our data lake as well. Like there's not like 5 steps you need to take to get there. You just need to look for that value in web events. So that was some big lessons learned and the reason why. And then we also, something now, so look, for the past 2 slides, you heard me talk about adding more stuff to the schema. Now, this is the first time you're going to hear me start talking about where to put common variables. But we're going to talk about that for the next few slides. So at least we learned. It might take us a couple times to learn, but we are moving to something new that we're learning. So on this semi-complex site, we started experimenting on where to set our common variables. We had a couple different places. You have that update variable action in your rule. So that's very Web SDK specific. And that's what we use on our very basic site. Super easy peasy, yay. But here in our more complex site, we're like, oh, I don't know if that's really what we want to do. Like, so we tried it out. And then we tried some like master data elements, or like that where we pulled in different pieces of data into this master data element. And we also tried AEP Web SDK extension. So you see our experimentation, we're kind of trying out all the places. And so that was our kind of medium complex site. And now, just a few months ago, we dove into our very last and our toughest site. And we definitely would do it again, start from the easiest and work to the hardest. That was, we feel very smart, learned a lot along the way. But you also kind of hit a wall. You're just like, oh my gosh, like how many sites do we have? So we had to keep reminding each other and ourselves, like, you've learned a lot, you've accomplished a lot. We're so close to achieving like this big milestone of getting all the sites coded on Web SDK. Like, we're right there, you got this. And we also did give ourselves a few more extra weeks. So if you remember back to our timeline from last time we met, we have a few months of contingency.
We're using it.
We needed it. Now we still have quite a bit of contingency, but we're like, oh my gosh, we got to give ourselves a reprieve. We need a few extra weeks, otherwise, there's just not enough Kleenexes for the tears.
There's a reason this is on a 2-year plan and not something we could get done in just a few months.
Exactly. So we were able to kind of finish strong and stay sane. So with our schema, we've been adding to the schema the whole entire time, not only things that we learned, but new fields. And I would highly recommend you guys doing that too. Like, just build it as you go. And then once again, this is where you're going to hear me say, like, hey, we learned some stuff about common variables. We learned some more stuff when we went to our hardest. We're like, oh man, we need to change some stuff around. Like, we thought we kind of had it, but we're like, nope, we really need to kind of rethink what we're doing here. But at the end of it, we are happy with our schema. So you can be happy to know, I'm not going to say that we deleted our data set and changed the schema. We did not. We've kept our data set. The schema is good. We have identified some coding modifications we want to make, but right now we feel really good with our schema. So you're like, Sarah, you've been talking about these common variables. Where did you end up? Where do you end up putting them? So what I'm showing you here is a screenshot of this data collection. It's part of the AEP Web SDK extension. And so when you go to the extension, it's really long. There's a lot of stuff in it. So we're specifically in the data collection. And for this whole conversation, we're going to be in this data collection section of it. And there's kind of two pieces, there's kind of three maybe sections in the data collection. First one here is this on, before, event, send, callback. And so where we ended up putting some variables was in this area. And you'll ask, like, well, why did you pick this place to put your variables, some of your common variables? It's because Gretchen came to me and she's like, Sarah, I thought you said you were tracking downloads and exit links. She's like, I'm not seeing any of that data, and you told me you were collecting it. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure I am. Let me go look. I'm like, I specifically remember like looking at that.
True story, bro.
True story, not lying. And I'm looking at it, I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, yes, it is getting triggered, but it didn't have the ECID, which is our primary identifier. You need to have the ECID. Otherwise, when it sends, like, you'll see the call the network tab, but when it gets to Adobe, it'll be like, nope, I'm not ingesting this. You're missing your ECID. You're missing your primary identifier on this row of data. I was like, oh man. And what I realized is, if we put our ECID, like the value, so if you look at line 180, that visitor info, that section of our schema is where our ECID is set. So I'm like, oh, if I value it in this block in this area always goes through. So this part always gets executed for every call. Then my ECID is going to be appended, or is going to be part of that download and exit link tracking. So I was like, huh, this is really cool. And so Of course, I got all excited. I was like, yeah, this is maybe the answer to our prayers. We're going to put all the common variables here in this one location. And that way it doesn't matter. They're not all over the place. They're not scattered across all our rules. They're not like in our master data elements. Like we don't have to worry about any of that stuff where we needed some flags. We're just going to put them here. So yes, so we made the executive decision, move everything that's common for every call to our extension. Now, if you look at this, can you tell me when I made that executive decision that I got so excited about? I don't think you can. Even Gretchen, I was giving her a sneak peek. I'm like,
I know. I was like, I can't see it.
You can't see it. You're like, I don't know. But if I show you this picture, we're on the left. I'm showing you activity map. And at the very top, you see this nice like page name that you're kind of used to seeing where it says, where's my cursor? I'm not sure where my cursor is at, but it says key.personal or key:personal: index. Like that's what you're expecting in your activity map, like your page name.
Mm-hmm.
And everything was good. And then you saw November is where I thought I was going to get all smart and move everything that's common to the extension. Well, you look at the right-hand side. Exactly. Now you see my bug. Like it still is tracking, but Gretchen is now telling me, Sarah, you know I don't report off URL. Like no one knows the URL. Like that's just like, where'd my page name go? I was like, oh man. So what I learned is that the content.page name, that variable is what's used by like the activity map. And we're going to talk about activity map here in a minute. And so obviously it was not picking up the page name when I moved it to the extension. So what was moved to the extension was web.webpagedetail.name. So that's an out of the box field group. So when you use the AEP, that really long one, AEP Web SDK experience, that field group in your schema, you get web.webpagedetail.name. So when I moved it into the extension, and before it was getting valued like up in the rule, and it was hunky-dory, but when I moved it, it was not hunky-dory. So I do like Gretchen. I value our friendship. So I did move all the common variables that are out of the box. I moved back up. Well, I didn't. I talked to my good friend Rashida. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know we just moved everything down into the extension. If it's an out of the box variable, move it back out because obviously that timing is not right. Something's not, Adobe's looking at out of the box variables sooner than the extension. We are keeping our custom variables that we want on every page call in the extension because no, Adobe's not relying on my custom variables, but we did move all the out of the box stuff out of the extension. Oh. So let's go over back to happy things. Speaking of activity map, let's get off the slide that has my bug. Speaking of activity map, we are replicating it by using the collect internal link clicks with event grouping. Oh my gosh, there's so many words here. So what you see on the left-hand side is that Adobe Experience Platform Web SDK extension within Launch. And like, once again, we're down here in that data collection section. So you've got to scroll down through the extension pretty far. We were just talking about that on before event send callback. So that piece of code, that's what we were looking, or that section of custom code, that's what we were just looking at. So now we're just kind of working our way down the extension. And so you see that we've clicked collect internal link clicks. So that checkbox is checked. And then we are using, like, I know it says beta, but we're using that event grouping. Now there's two event groupings, one with local storage, one with session storage, one says recommended, one does not. We just went with the one that says recommended, but we're going to modify it because session storage does not meet our need. Session storage is subdomain specific. So www.key.com is different than like aox.key.com, which is not good. Like I need to be able to track people going from one subdomain to another. I can't just drop it in between. So I want that activity map to pass through. So that's why we picked the one that said recommended. Because really, I just need to kind of piggyback on Adobe's logic. I'm like, yeah, Adobe, you go get what you think is clicked on. I'm going to do some modifications to it because I want to be able to track it across subdomains. So what did we change? All right, so the first step of this modification, let me go back here. So up here where it says on before event send callback, that's one place you can put custom code. And then there's another place, if you look at the bottom of that, it says filter, click details. And that is kind of deals with your clicks. So we're going to actually end up being in both of these custom code blocks, but we're going to first start with that filter click details that you see at the bottom of the screenshot. So the first step that we've done in this modification, and I'm just going to be super honest, like, I mean, I've been doing web implementation for many, many, many years, and this is new. So, 3 years from now, maybe even next year, I might look back and be like, woo, I can't believe I did it this way. So I'm being really open and transparent, and hopefully you don't judge too harshly. If you're doing it a different way, I'd love to hear how you're doing it, but this is how we're doing it. And right now it's working for us. Will we change in the future? I'm 100% fine if we do. I mean, you just saw that I will delete a data set to redo my schema. So I definitely will redo coding if there's a better way. So definitely feel free to say if you're doing it differently, or, or I'll also tell you in a couple of years if we changed it. But this is how we're doing it now. So our first step of this modification is to take that data that Adobe is surfacing. So when you click into this filter click details, those comments on lines 1 through 8, they'll be there for everybody. Like, we didn't put those in. They were already there. We kept them there because they're really helpful. And so Adobe's like, hey, I'm going to capture these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is it 6? Click event, page name, link region, link type, link URL. All right, those 6 things I'm going to make available. They're making available to me right in here. So I'm like, awesome. What you see below, like lines 10 through 38, is us taking those 6 pieces of data and putting them into a cookie, because a cookie that I write will go across our subdomains. As you see down on line 36, we're like, as long as you're on key.com, I'm golden, and that's what I need. That's where I want to be able to track across those subdomains. Some of these things may look odd, and that's because, when you're working through it, sometimes you don't know if you're not doing something right, or was there just not a value. So that's why you see me like kind of look through it, like, hey, if there's a link.link URL or content.link URL, then put that value, otherwise put missing. So I just wanted to know, like, did it even hit my logic? Did it not hit my logic? Did it hit it and there just wasn't a value? So long haul, I don't know if I'll keep it, but here, when you're first trying it out and you're not sure it's going to work, I need to have a value to know I came in here and it wasn't there, hence it was missing, or it was there and I have a value. On the kind of going down, the link URL, like, it's really the whole URL. I don't want all of that. I just want the host and the path name. Like, I don't need all those URL parameters at this point for a link tracking. So I'm just kind of bringing us down.
Thank you.
Us down.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then we definitely need the page name, as you know. But here in this instance, I'm like, well, if the page name's not there, then I'm going to default to the URL, because that's better than nothing. Like, Gretchen, I know, wants the page name, but if somehow the page name is not there, at least give me the URL so we have something. And then once again, if not even there, put missing, because I'm trying to learn. And then the link name, region, and type. So we're all good. I encode all of those because I don't want our dev team coming back and asking me, like, what are you doing in your cookie? Like, you're not cookie compliant. So everything's getting encoded, so there's not some weird character. And I'm saving it.
Yeah.
So this all
has been in cookie jail before, just to let you know.
All my secrets are getting let out. Yes, I have been in trouble with cookies before. So I learned my lesson. So all this is happening down that filter click detail. So what is happening? You click on something on your website, Adobe's like, oh, I'm gonna hold this data. Now they're gonna try to hold it in session storage, but I'm like, I really need it as a cookie. So I'm gonna be like, okay, you do your thing, but I'm taking your data too and putting it in the cookie. So we got the data in the cookie, the click data in the cookie, well, the activity map data in the cookie. What do we do now? Now we need to be able to read that cookie in the next call. So the next step is to add logic to look for that cookie, and you're going to look for it on that on before event send callback. So we look back here. We were at the very bottom of the filter click detail, and now we're at the very top of the on before event send callback, because that's the part that's read and executed for every single call. So that's why I'm putting the code there. So before we send that call out, I'm like, hey, do you have something in the cookie about what I clicked on that needs to be sent in this call? And so that's what this logic is doing. We're finding the cookie, and yes, I called it the content info. It worked for me. It was called content dot something, on the previous page, so I just went with content. So we're looking, hey, does that cookie exist? If so, awesome. We're going to have to set the web interaction information. And so that's what you see happening. If it's found, we walk through every piece of the web interaction, and I'm going to show you the schema on the next slide. So you'll see, like, yeah, I see why she picked these things to set, because they're in the schema. So we set the name, the region, the URL, the type, and I'm going to highlight a couple things here. Oops. I'm going to highlight here. You're like, Sarah, it says web interaction.url, but in your comments, you're saying that you're putting the page name here. Yes, I'll show you the sadness. I don't know who was in charge of this, but they did not consult Gretchen. So I'm having to overwrite what's supposed to be the URL with the page name. You'll see why on the next screen. And then also you see here that I am checking the value of the type. So we're all used to saying exit, download, and other, from Adobe Analytics. Well, here it's super specific, and you'll see why on the next screen too. Like, if it's not one of those three values, your call will get rejected. It will not get ingested. And I did see that with a couple of our calls. I can't remember exactly what the problem was, but it was very few. But I'm like, well, geez, these are, for us, it was super important to know a click happened. And so I'm just going to default to other. Like, if it's not other, exit, or download, then I'm going to default to other, because I still want the data to come in. Gretchen can say, Sarah, we have some funky looking other data, and then we can dig into it. But at least the data is making it there, so we know we have something going on, versus it just getting rejected and not even ingested. So let's look at why I'm calling these out against our schema. So looking at our schema, yeah, you do see like what we just valued from our cookie, link tracks, the URL, the name, the region, the type. Now you may say, well, Sarah, there's something called name there. Did you just completely miss that? That name is not page name. That name holds the name of what was clicked. So if you clicked a button that says get info, name will say get info. It's not the name of the page. So we'll take a moment, acknowledge that the missing page name, pour out a little bit of our coffee to say, in reverence of page name not being there. But with page name not being there, that's why I overwrote URL, because in our world, that's, Gretchen's world, which is my world, URL is not that important. It's more important to have the page name. So that's why you saw that I said, okay, give me the page name, but if there's no page name, then give me the URL. And if there's no URL, give me missing. Because we want something to be there, and I would put them in precedence. Page name, URL, and just like, oh man, something's missing. Go figure out what's happening. And then we see why we had to do that check. It's because type is an enum, not an emu, but an enum. And so what does that mean? It means, so once again, we just asked AI, and it means, since it's called an enum, and I'm reading right here, strictly control the values being ingested. So if it's not one of the three of download, exit, and other, then it won't be ingested. And we did see it. I can't remember the exact specific scenario, but it was very limited. But in our instance, we're like, hey, we don't want to lose any of it. So if it's not one of those three, we're going to default it to other. You may decide not to do that. You may be like, well, if it's not one of those three, then forget it. And that's fine. But when you look at like our code, we defaulted to other because we're like, well, we want to save it and we'll just try to see, use it to help us troubleshoot what's going on. All right, back to the extension. We're working our way down it. So we just looked at that collect internal link clicks, and now we're going to move down to collect external link clicks and collect download. So you kind of heard me talking about earlier, like I thought we were doing, external links and download. Like what gives? Like why was that not working? Well, one of them was that ECID. It needed to be on all the calls, and it wasn't on those 2 calls. So that goes back to, we put the ECID up there at the very top, the on before event send callback. That's where we're valuing our field, our custom field, to hold our ECID. And then I think that was good for downloads. That was the biggest thing. But for external links, we got to do a little bit more work. So like I said, for both external and the download, the ECID, please make sure it's on your call. Once again, right here on line 180, where we're setting our visitor info section, that holds our ECID. So do something similar.
And Adobe makes it really hard to know why they're rejecting your calls.
Yes, and that's not the easiest thing in the world.
So that's why we got to get all this stuff up front.
And then for the external link calls, I think all of us are accustomed to going into our Adobe Analytics interface, like in the admin area of it, and saying, hey, these URLs, while they may not be www.key.com or even key.com, I still want to treat them like they're our website. I think every company I've worked at, we've always had some type of URL that we don't want to count as an exit link. And so I'm like, well, where am I supposed to upload that? Where is that supposed to go? Well, it goes here back down in that filter click details. So what you need to look at is to say that link type, that we are looking at, is it exit, is it other, is it download? If it's exit, that's that yellow box, then check out your link URL. So here I know it says modified URL.host. That includes, but I'll show you later, but that modified URL is really the content.link URL. I've just like lopped off some stuff off of it, like the protocol, and I think the URL parameters, so that's why it says modified. But really what's valuing it is that content.link URL. And if it includes a domain that you're like, treat this as internal, then return false and it will stop the call from going off. So that's what you see there. I like check for these different, I just use the exact same ones. So I looked at our Adobe Analytics implementation. I'm like, I'm just putting the same exact thing here. And so that's how I got these sites. These are the same ones that we have in our Adobe Analytics implementation. And it just said return false, which will stop the call from going out. So then you're not tracking them as an exit link. You also saw right above here in this purple, you forget all these things that you set up, because these are all the things that you set up one time when you do your Adobe Analytics, and then like you don't ever do it again. So I was like, oh man, these kind of caught me. Oh, it just made me giggle, because it's like you have to do everything all over again. And so sometimes you might see these JavaScript mail to and telephone, like your implementation might say, don't ever track these, and that's fine. You can do return false for these as well. Here, we did want to keep them because we got some stuff that's important to us that will look like a mail to. We definitely have some telephone numbers that we want to make sure that we know are people clicking that telephone number. And so we are keeping them. We're not saying return false. We're like, let this call go through, but don't call it an exit. Call it an other. So we're just changing the link type from exit to other and letting it go through. Okay, oh my gosh. So I feel like that was a lot, and not everything can fit on the screen. So there was some stuff that we left on the cutting room floor just to make it presentation friendly. But you all can do this. You can do this today for Adobe Analytics. You can do it tomorrow for Web SDK. You can go look at everybody's implementation. So just a reminder of how to do that. At the very top left, you go to someone's website, you right click to say inspect, and then you go to the network tab. and then filter on launch, and you can see their launch. And you'll grab that whole entire launch. So see where it says request URL in that red box, grab that bad boy and put it into a browser, open up a new tab. Now take out that .min. So you see at the very end, it's like .min.js. Get rid of the min, and then it will be very friendly, readable. And then you can just search on stuff that you just saw in my screenshots. And you can see my whole code base. Once again, judge kindly.
No judgment.
And you can see it all in all its glory. And yeah, nothing's on the cutting room floor. Everything's right there for you to see. So if you're like, oh my gosh, that was a lot, and I feel like she kind of missed some of her code, it wasn't trying to be mean. I was just trying to get it to fit on the screen, like the most important parts. But you can go look at it. So it's all out there for you to look at.
Let her know if you have a better way of doing anything. She's always looking for better ways.
Exactly. All right, so we are going to take a moment because that was a lot. And I kind of feel like it was good, but we definitely kind of like rabbit hole. We talked about common variables, and then we were like, talked about activity map, which led us to download an exit link. So we went in a meaningful way, but now we need to reset because I'm going to pull us all the way back up to the top of our journey. So moment to recenter. So we talked a lot about determining where to set variables, and we really went down the path of custom variables versus out of the box variables being in your extension. And so we have some in our extension, and we've also had some. That's that top image. Now if we move over to the middle screenshot, this is us like on our super duper basic site. We just set the update variable, and so you see like some of those circles are partially blue because in this action, in the update variable, we opened them up and set specific variables. You can do that with a super simple implementation, which is like one page column, one link track. It's probably the best way to do it. But then if you see it at the bottom image, when we got to our more complex site, we could not do that. Like doing individual pieces of your update variable was going to just cause us to lose more of our marbles than we've already lost. So we moved to a provide entire object approach. So we still have the update variable action, but instead of boom, 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 like individually updating stuff, we're going to say, nope, go look at this one data element, and this one data element will tell you everything to set. And so, like I said, that's the approach that we're taking. We kind of took on some of our medium sites, medium complexity, and definitely our most complex site this is how we're doing it. We have a couple different like master or centralized data elements. Like here you see them, like we have the XDM variable, which we use that one on more like page events. And then we have one for custom link tracking. So yeah, so if you looked at our implementation, you would see all three kind of places being used, all of them having a different reason on why we need to do it that way. And really at the end of the day, no matter what type of site, from like the most easiest, the most basic to the most complex, the goal that we have is to have a structure for that like launch property for that site that is efficient to maintain and efficient or scalable, whatever word you want to use, to build upon. So I think on our more complex sites, like this is a picture, some pictures of our like master data element where like, hey, for page calls, here's some variables we want to set, and here's some more variables to set, and then here's some more. So instead of taking these and putting them individually in that update variable, we have some checks and balances. Like you see, we have some if statements, and we are using some flags in some instances of should the data, even if it's available in the data layer, should it be sent on this call or should it not be sent on this call? So our most complex, I feel like we're in a good place. And I know that that's one of the things when we said on our most complex, we identified some coding changes, and that's the coding changes we identified is just how we want to kind of make sure that we're maintaining efficiency and scalability. I know I'm kind of running up to time, so the console debugging, like Gretchen said, this is not fun. I'll kind of fly through these. Oh, but I am sad. Dear Diary, I'm not sure what I'm more sad about, that Adobe Summit, it's not in March in 2026, or that my favorite debugger for analytics extension is not compatible with Web SDK. Goodbye, dear friend. So yeah, I mean, in the console, we're all used to like satellite dots, set debug to true. Same thing with Alloy. I feel like it's not maybe as robust on telling me my issues. Like I think they kind of suppress some issues, which is nice on one hand, but it is here. We turn it on. It's helpful. Maybe not as helpful as my satellite one, but it's still there. And network is my favorite way. I know it kind of stinks to do it the network tab because you got to expand everything, which is on the next slide, but this is how we did it. Went to the network, make sure you're recording. So top left with that yellow box, filter on .com/EE. You can just do EE, but some other stuff on our site had EE. So if I did .com/EE, then I just got Web SDK stuff. And if you're like, why EE? Well, if you go back to your extension, if you scroll all the way to the very bottom, the edge base path is EE. So just like everybody else used to be B/SS, the default is EE. And then go to your payload, which is your red box. And then where the word event is, right click on that little black like sideways arrow and go down. And when you'll have a little pop up and you'll see expand recursively, that green box. That's going to be your best friend. It will just expand everything out.
Like
you don't
magic.
you don't have to click down onto every single one. Just expand recursively. There's a lot that opens up. You can close some stuff that you don't want to see, but it's much nicer to close than to open everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would just, from there, I would copy that payload. I'd put it in Excel. And then I would go over and copy my B/SS call and put it in Excel and just make sure all my variables were there. Granted, they're all in different little locations, but this is my favorite way. So this is the best way. I did use the Adobe Experience Platform Debugger extension. It's not working for me right now, but I'll show you what I did. And when it did work, it was helpful. So you download the extension. And where you're going to go, you have a lot of clicks. So open the extension, reload the page. That way you have some data coming through. Click on that Experience Platform Web SDK at the top left. Then click on that Edge transaction. Next, you'll hit sign in because you need to sign in. So you sign into your own instance, and then you'll be able to connect. Once you're connected, click that little pop-out icon, and it will pop it out into its own browser window. It will probably have nothing in it, step 8, so you'll want to reload your page. And then step 9, this is where it's not working for me right now. Of course, when I want to have a screenshot for a presentation, it's like, I'm not going to connect for you correctly. So I'm missing the row that would have my flag. Like usually that type, I think, was said generic. And of course, I didn't have a screenshot. I couldn't find an old screenshot. But if you see a row that says generic as your type, as that second column, and then look in your flag column, if something is wrong with your implementation, like you're missing the ECID, there'll be a little flag, and then you can, in that red column, and then you can expand that orange box to see what the problem is. And this was helpful when it was working. So I'm sorry I don't have it working for you right now. It's on my list to figure out why. And in our next event, I'll tell you what I found and how to fix it in case it happens to you. So that is the end. It's 5:01. It's a little bit longer one, but this was the second chapter of our epic saga. We coded, we recoded. We did continue to question our life choices, just like we did in chapter 1, but we have made it. And then the next time we get together, Gretchen will be talking about all the CJA setup that she's done, and we'll be talking about what it looks like when we've been running the stuff in tandem. Mm-hmm. So, that is our spiel for today. I've lost my cursor again, so I don't want to click on close or something. So Gretchen, Luke, anything in the chat, anything that we want touch on right before we
No,
let
I
everybody?
think we got one item in the chat was from Kevin. You want to know the recording from the first session. So I provided a YouTube link, and Gretchen provided the link on our site, the Analytics AUGS.
Awesome.
So there's a couple of different ways. Gretchen's link also has the deck, so it's much more comprehensive than the link I provided. So thank you, Gretchen.
Awesome. Well, this was fantastic. I appreciate it.
Yes. So, yes, I appreciate Sarah for working really hard on A, getting Web SDK on the site, and B, getting this presentation together.
I know. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, love you
There
guys.
were tears.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So the more we can learn from you, the shorter our implementation can be then.
Yes. You won't have quite as many Kleenexes when you're crying.
Oh, we might still cry. It's like, oh, I remember Sarah
I
told
think
me
it's
that.
part of it. That is part of the implementation. A few tears.
Yes.
Oh, well, fantastic. Well, thank you guys. Hey, Shane. I wasn't seeing everybody's name, so this has been fun. I'll stop recording.
All right.